My name is Honorable Abdul Haro, Member of Parliament for Mandera South constituency, and I'm also a member of the Education Committee, the Committee of Education and Research in the Parliament of Kenya. On Sunday, 8th September 2024, the world will be commemorating International Literacy Day. And therefore, Kenya, like many other countries in the world, will be joining hands with other global actors in order to draw attention to the importance of this day. It is appreciated that, according to statistics, that 70% of the 10-year-olds in the world cannot read or write. It is also a fact that the education crisis, the learning crisis that is engulfing the world right now, and particularly if we go back to our countries, even in Kenya, we have a very serious learning crisis, is not fully appreciated by leaders, by members of parliament who legislate, by those members of government in the executive who plan and execute government programs. They have not fully appreciated the fact that learning is in a crisis in our countries, and learning is in a crisis in the world. And this is why it is important to draw attention of everybody to this day, so that we can create awareness around the question of literacy and the question of learning of our children in school. I'm a pastoralist, and pastoralists say, a calf of today is tomorrow's cow, which means a child of today is tomorrow's adult, is tomorrow's leader, is tomorrow's member of parliament, is tomorrow's president, is tomorrow's decision makers. And it means a lot how we prepare these learners of today so that they can become useful citizens of the world tomorrow. And maybe drawing our attention slightly to the question around education in general. Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights declares that every child has a right to education. The Constitution of Kenya 2010, under Article 53, declares that every child has a right to free basic education. Underline the word free basic education. And Article 55, again of the same Constitution of Kenya, obligates the state to ensure that youth access relevant education. We all know education is the equalizer of society. The children of the less fortunate can only have an equal opportunity to compete with the children of those who are more fortunate if they have acquired the same level of education. And this is why International Literacy Day is quite important. Maybe I can mention a few issues in Kenya education system which have made it impossible for learners in some parts of this country to acquire the skills to read and write right from the early stages. One, we have questions around regional inequality. Expected years of schooling in some parts of Kenya is 12 years on average. And that is the national average, so to speak. And places like Nairobi easily reach that target. But when you go to some areas, especially in the arid and semi-arid lands, areas which we consider far and hard to reach, areas which are less developed in this country historically since independence, those areas, the expected years of schooling on average is 6.5 years. You see, not almost, it's actually a half of the national average. And this is as a result of the regional inequalities. Our regions are very seriously unequal. Some regions have developed very fast. They almost, in the category of the first world, and some regions are still very, very far behind in all indicators of human development. And then, of course, there is the question around lack of financial resources, which has made education outcomes low in rural areas of this country compared to urban areas in this country. Net enrollment rates are lower in groups and rural areas than in urban areas because of the question around financial resources. Some areas, some regions in this country, learners are still studying under trees and under rocks, while in some areas in this country, there are skyscrapers, 4, 5, 6-story buildings with all facilities, wash and everything, where learners have a very good environment of learning. So that disparity in question around financial resources is also a big factor in ensuring that we have literacy for every child in this country. And then, of course, we've had some recent challenges. You remember, towards late 2019 and the whole of 2020, the whole world was grappling with the impact of the COVID-19 menace. And COVID-19 problem hit this country very hard. And it hit everybody uniformly. But of course, those who are already struggling were hit even harder than those who are able to stabilize after a very quick period. More than 30,000 primary and secondary schools were closed for over 6 months. More than 30,000 primary and secondary schools were closed for over 6 months. About 320,000 teachers were affected when those schools were closed. And about 7 million learners stayed at home without attending classes or school for 6 months. While some students in some regions which were a bit, fortunate because they could access technology, they could access electricity, students from rural areas, especially in arid and semi-arid lands, in northern Kenya, and far and hard to reach areas, had really to struggle because they could not have that luxury of resorting to technology as they were home, while some students were leveraging on technology to continue classes from the comfort of their houses. Students in some of those hard to reach areas were just staying at home for 6 months without the benefit of being able to leverage on technology, and without the benefit of, because of the challenges also due to the fact that some of those areas are not connected to electricity, and even if you had internet, without electricity you could not access that internet. Therefore, those recent challenges, coupled with after El Nino, some regions of this country went through some very serious drought, where parents had to move with their children in pasture, in looking for pasture and water for their livestock, because their life is centered around moving with their livestock, livestock being the main livelihood for those families. And then, of course, between October, November 2023, all the way up to April 2024, we had a very serious Super El Nino hitting some regions of this country. Most schools were submerged. Some students were again forced to stay at home or move with their families because even their homes were submerged. Other schools were swept away. In other areas, teachers were cut off from reaching their schools. Students were cut off from reaching their schools by overflowing rivers and lakes and roads which were impassable to any means, by using any means of transport. Roads were completely cut off. And those recent challenges have also contributed to ensuring that some, of course, students dropped out and never recouped, never gone back to classes again. And some had to do a lot of catch-up in an area where already teaching, for example, is a big gap. We have very few teachers in some regions in this country, because lack of enough teachers to teach our children in those schools, and that kind of thing. And then, of course, economic difficulties. Kenya, as many other parts of the world, are now grappling with a lot of economic challenges. And this has contributed to a lot of increase in dropout due to poverty, unemployment. Many families, as a result of economic challenges, are unable to afford school fees, university fees, or vocational college fees, or even pre-primary school fees. And therefore, that critical stage, children up to 10 years, that critical stage of pre-primary where learners have to be molded and prepared is disrupted. Most parents would rather see those who have already made it to high school or those who have already made it to university continue, rather than keep a child of 10-year-old in pre-primary. So they would rather these younger ones drop out and keep the other ones in school, and in some families, the entire lot, all the way to university, are made to stay at home, and this affects learning in some parts of this world. And therefore, the message on this day, International Literacy Day, is to make it clear to everybody that education or learning of our children is a collective responsibility of all of us. We need to come together and collaboratively, confront these challenges of learning, this crisis of learning. We need to come together as leaders. We need to come together as civil society organizations. We need to come together as parents. We need to come together as government officials. We need to come together as citizens of the world to put our heads together, to pool our resources together, and to ensure that learning goes on in particularly areas of the greatest need. Those people who are not able to access education or unable to access learning should not be left behind, in the principle of ensuring that no one is left behind in getting education, in ensuring that they play their part in the development of this world by making sure they get the necessary education, the necessary learning, the necessary skills. And for those of us who are in Parliament, I think it's a reminder to us that we need to legislate laws and appropriate funds, more funds to education and learning, so that more of our children who are not in school now are able to access schools, are able to access education institutions, so that we build a happy world where everybody has an equal opportunity to be able to contribute positively to the development of the world. So we need to coordinate. We need to show political leadership for those of us who are in politics, and we need to make sure that every child gets an opportunity to learn.